Conservative Political Action Conference here in Florida, second year running after Maryland abandoned this program, which has been out there for a number of years. It's time for a Ukraine update. Once again, geopolitical situation, what's going on. A number of developments taking place over the past 24 hours. As I informed viewing audience yesterday, 12 hours were critical, and it turns out they were critical. Somehow the Ukrainians have managed to hold Russian forces at bay in Kiev and Kharkov and other cities around the country. At the moment, they've yet to capture Kiev, and rumors and reports are that Vladimir Putin is becoming frustrated and annoyed at the pace of movement. Well, we'll see. A lot of mainstream, fake-stream, lamestream media is still running around with these amateur analysts with no experience in intelligence, making proclamations and claims that, in fact, the Russian forces are failing, that they're not effective. It's a bit early to make that call, and we don't really have the information to make that call. Video clips of people recording things and also sharing things from past 8 years of conflict are not news. It's also not intelligence, it's information. And one needs to be very careful about falling into the hole of believing things that simply are not true. So let's just go with what we do know. We do know that it's been reported widely that Vladimir Putin has ordered his nuclear forces on high alert. That's a bit disturbing, but I'll tell you that's likely a political signal to NATO. And this is in response to what they claim is NATO ratcheting up the rhetoric over the past 24 hours. Jens Stoltenberg loves the saber rattle, as does Joe Biden. At least normally Jens Stoltenberg has something behind it. Unlike Joe Biden, there's nothing behind his saber rattling, just empty nonsense. So Russia has put its nuclear forces on high alert. That's disturbing, folks. That's not happened often. It has happened in the past, but not in the recent past very often. But during the Cold War, it happened a number of times and puts us on the brink, at least politically it does. Of course, yesterday, Putin threatened neutral states, any move towards political or military alliance with NATO, and it would be severe consequences. Now, who was this targeted at? Of course, Finland, Sweden, Austria, and Switzerland. As I shared with you yesterday, now it's probably going to backfire. Finland had no interest in joining NATO. Sweden had no interest, despite having worked with NATO in the Balkans, in Bosnia in particular. When I was deployed there, we worked with the Swedish battalion, the Nord Pole Brigade. They were quite effective, but they had no interest in joining NATO. Austria, which has been neutral since 1955 after the four powers removed themselves from Vienna, which a lot of people forget, Vienna was just like Berlin. It was divided by four powers. You had the American, French, the British, and the Soviet sector. Vienna was the same way from 45 to 55, and then became a neutral country. Finland, of course, is famous despite its incredible efforts to defeat the Soviet forces in the Winter War of 1939, eventually having to settle a peace with the Soviets, and then joining the Nazis for the continuation war in 1941 to recoup the 20% of Finnish territory stolen by the Soviet Union. And the Finns have acquitted themselves well in the past. But since the Second World War, Finland has followed a policy that's turned into a verb, Finlandization, in which a country becomes neutral in their politics so as not to antagonize a powerful neighbor. A lot of people are Monday morning quarterbacking about what happened in Ukraine. If Ukraine had just declared unilaterally that they weren't going to join NATO, then they never would have become a target of Russia. That's not really accurate analysis. I understand where people are coming from. It may have helped remove a reason, an excuse, a pretense for Putin, but Putin clearly has other designs. Now, a lot of people are freaking out about whether Russia will invade the Baltics. Well, there's nothing to stop them. Certainly not 1,300 U.S. troops in Estonia and 2,000 in Lithuania. That's not going to stop the Russian army at all. Not even a speed bump. That's worse than what we were during the Cold War in the Fulda Gap. But here's the problem. The Baltic states have already invoked Article 4, which requires the NATO alliance to provide material support and assistance to any partner who's asking for it when they feel they're under threat. That's Article 4 of the NATO Charter. Now, Article 5, which considers an attack against one member of NATO as an attack against all members of NATO, is something that would be invoked should Russia attack them. And that, of course, means most likely a full-on conflict with NATO. That's quite frightening. Given that Putin has now put his nuclear forces on high alert, very disturbing prospects here, folks. Now, I don't think we're headed to an all-out war. I don't think we're headed to World War III, which a lot of people are screaming about. Also, I don't think we're headed towards nuclear conflagration. But in the pressure, the heightened pressure of such a situation, it's very easy for political leaders to make mistakes and make stupid decisions. Look at Jack Kennedy over the Cuban Missile Crisis. We came inches from a nuclear war in the 1960s because of John Fitzgerald Kennedy. His rash reactions nearly put us in nuclear war in his dispute with Khrushchev. So we came that close. But I don't think that's where we're headed with this situation right now. So let me just get you a little further down along the line. So today we've seen Russian forces, nuclear forces, put on high alert. We've seen Russian forces fail to capture Kiev. Zelensky, to my knowledge, is still free, and they have not captured Kharkov. Also, a number of Russian aircraft reportedly shot down. The German government has suddenly done a complete about-face, turned 180 degrees the opposite direction, now supports sanctioning Russia in the SWIFT program, something that leaves Joe Biden looking stupid, foolish, and callow as he sits back here in his, as Larry Kudlow today said here at the CPAC conference, his jihad against American energy. That's exactly what this administration is on, a jihad against American energy. Instead of conducting a war against American industry, American energy industry, why don't you let them do their job and make us energy independent once again? Once again. Wouldn't that be nice? Folks, we are importing 595,000 barrels of crude oil from Russia every day. That's $55 million at the current price of oil, $93 a barrel on the spot market. $55 million. That means that Vladimir Putin has potentially made $225 million since he started the war with Crimea, with the Ukraine in the last couple of days. So I'm distracted by someone having a conversation here. I picked a spot where nobody's talking, and it seems to not have worked. Anyway, it's frustrating when you're in a hotel and you can't find a private room. But $55 million a day in oil revenue alone. Don't forget tantalum, and you've also got diamonds and lots of other mineral resources that the Russians trade with, folks. So Russia is profiting from this war. Now, a lot of mainstream, fake stream, lamestream media are going on and on about protests. There was a massive protest in Berlin. Appeared to be hundreds of thousands of people out the street in support of Ukraine. Well, yay, thank you so much. Meanwhile, people are dying. What exactly are you doing? Are you volunteering to go fight there? Is your government sending weapons? Your government opposed sending weapons to Ukraine. Germany, your so-called conservative government, it's not a conservative government, it's a leftist government, and even under conservative chancellor, it wasn't conservative of America, it was also a leftist government, interventionist, liberty-depriving government of the Germans. Yeah, so the Germans have about face, and now they put Joe Biden in a very bad light. He's about to give the State of the Union address, and the State of the Union is a total disaster. Utter disaster. America is in the worst shape it's been since 1979 under James Earl Carter. It's a total disaster, ladies and gentlemen. Hyperinflation. Energy prices double what they were a year ago. Energy dependence on Iran, on Russia. Russia invading Ukraine. Americans doing nothing. Leaving the Americans abandoned there. The only people that seem to be making active efforts to get people out of Ukraine seem to be Jewish Ukrainians. We're running all sorts of events trying to get people out of Ukraine. It's unbelievable. Also today, the U.S. government announced through USAID and the State Department will be providing $54 million of emergency humanitarian aid for Ukraine. Yay! Well, thank you so much. $54 million. Are you serious? That's not even a burp. So we're giving $54 million to Ukraine emergency humanitarian aid, and Russia's making $55 million today off the U.S. taxpayer and energy consumer. Yeah, something just not quite right there, Joe. And then in the same release, the State Department crows about how they've given $250 million in aid over the past decade. Really? Really? That's what you're talking about? How about some javelins? How about some stingers? How about some means to fight with? That's what's needed in Ukraine. So let me recap some of the key events that have happened in the past number of hours. Kiev, still not captured by Russian forces. Kharkov, still not captured by Russian forces. Putin reportedly frustrated and upset. Germany has done about-face on the SWIFT system, which, by the way, it's not transferring money. It's a communications method on how people get money transferred amongst these big banks around the world. It'll have an immediate demonstrable effect on the ability of Russia to sell its petroleum. They'll have to take cash or barter for things if they can't use SWIFT. So Germany does an about-face on that. The U.S. government announces $54 million of emergency humanitarian assistance to the Ukraine. We're still not flying C-17s. Now it's a war zone, so I understand why, but not flying C-17s in to evacuate Americans. We're not even flying C-17s to eastern Poland to link up with Americans who get out of Ukraine and evacuate them from Poland. Because remember, the western borders of the modern state of Ukraine, which includes the eastern third of Poland, between Belarus and Ukraine, is on Poland and Romania's border. Both of those are NATO powers, or NATO members. And so, yeah, Russia's now closer to NATO, which is apparently what Putin was saying was the reason he didn't want Ukraine to become a NATO member. Well, he's now just right on the border with NATO. Of course, he already was with Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. He's extended his border now by doing this. We're going on about Victoria Nuland. So let me address something else here, folks. There are all kinds of rumors. The internet is going bat crap crazy right now, saying that Tamara Lich, the activist who organized the Freedom Convoy 2022 in Canada, was found dead in her cell today. There's no independent confirmation of that. I don't know if that's true. It could be true. It may not be true. But you got to be careful out there, folks. The problem with the internet, just like the mainstream media, is garbage in, garbage out. So you've got to be objective. And if you don't trust me, go find your own source and deal with it. But I'm just telling you that we have no confirmation that Tamara Lich is dead. What I can say is that she was distraught in her treatment. I watched her video, her appeal for people to stick with the freedom-loving patriots in Canada under the fascist, totalitarian dictatorship of juicy, blackface, racist Trudeau. Yeah. You know, it's ironic because, unlike the United States, Canada didn't have a Bill of Rights at its inception. Canada became a confederation in 1867, and they didn't protect their freedoms in the same way that we did. We had a constitution shortly after the Articles of Confederation had failed. We had a constitutional convention. We came up with a constitution to establish our government, and then the first 10 amendments to consecrate recognition that inalienable rights or unalienable rights granted by our Creator are ours. We did that from the outset. Not from our birth, which is 1776, but from the outset of our Constitution in 1789 when it was ratified. The Canadians didn't do that until 1981, the Charter of Freedoms and Rights and Liberties. The irony for Justin Trudeau is the Prime Minister who signed that law was Pierre Trudeau. So liberty-robbing little juicy Trudeau has abrogated and turned into toilet paper the Canadian Charter. Yeah. And the strongest argument they have for it is not that a foreign power was threatening the national security of Canada, which is what the emergency powers are for, or that demonstrations were burning and looting or destroying the public safety of people. The reason they invoke the Charter, well, the real reason is because they're terrified of the working class. Isn't that ironic? The proletariat has turned on the socialists. That's hilarious. Truck drivers are the working class, and they turned on the proletariat. Or the proletariat turned on the elites. But what they're afraid of in Canada is freedom. And the irony here is, and this is an appeal to Canadians, you need to take a close look at the structure of your parliament. Trudeau's party is a minority party ruling through a coalition. That there has not been a vote of no confidence to this point is absolutely astounding. Absolutely astounding. They've invoked martial law fraudulently because people inconvenience people in Ottawa. I submit to you, if you live in Helsinki or Berlin, Paris, London, Washington, D.C., or Ottawa, and you have your feelings hurt because people come there and voice their opinion and protest and rally against what government's doing or for government, you might want to reconsider relocating to a different location. Did you expect a Freedom Rally convoy to go to the tar sands in Alberta and hold the rally there? That's not where government's at. They never threatened the parliament. They never burned. They never looted. They never caused any destruction. The lies about them defecating yards were just that, lies, and disproven. Peaceful, law-abiding, Gandhi-esque like protests. Were they loud? True. Did they obstruct traffic? Yeah, then cite them. Cite them. If they're public safety hazard, then remove them. But don't invoke martial law, freeze people's bank accounts, and this is why they do it. When your bank account's frozen, you can't pay your mortgage. They'll collude with the banks to foreclose on your home immediately. They'll sell your items at public auction, your memories, your keepsakes, your clothing, and you won't be able to pay your other bills. And then they'll arrest you for being a debtor and imprison you. This is fascism. This is what the Nazis did in 1934, 1935, 1936. It's no different than Kristallnacht. No different than Ernst Römer's Sturmabteilung. This is what's going on, folks. This is what's going on. Do you all remember when I did the live stream of the Ottawa Police Service Commission? How sick and perverted those people who sit on that commission were? All of them talking about an occupation and domestic terrorists. with a straight face. It's unbelievable. And of course, we should start no broadcast on Canada without starting with this comment here. Now, for those of you who are First Nation or Native American, don't take offense because this is not directed at you. Nothing but the utmost respect for the communities of Native Americans in this country and for First Nations in Canada. But this stupid virtue signaling is comical. It could be a Saturday Night Live skit if anybody watched Saturday Night Live. So you ready? Here we are at the Toronto Police Service Commission. Hi, I'm Goofus McGilliguddy, the chairman of the Ottawa Police Service Commission. And I would be remiss if first we didn't say that this land belongs since time immemorial to the Algonquin people, who arrived here, we don't know when, but thousands of years ago, when it was unoccupied. And so it's their ancestral land. We've stolen it from them. Those with insufficient pigmentation in their skin, we're guilty of a heinous crime of land theft. And we care so much about it that you look around this Police Service Commission, not a single First Nations member on the panel. That's how much we care. But we're going to virtue signal now and apologize and bend over and kowtow for stealing land. Of course, I wasn't here in 1737 when these insufficiently pigmented people came here and stole this land, and my ancestors were Ukrainians who came here in 1895, but it's still my fault, so we're all going to apologize for what's happened to the Algonquin land. Of course, let me do a poll of all the members here on the Toronto Police Service Commission, or the Ottawa, I keep saying Toronto, on the Ottawa Police Service Commission, who are First Nation members. That silence, would you hear, is empty-headed virtue signaling. Total frauds. Total frauds. Anyway, this calls for a drink of my Frappuccino. Anyway, folks, let me recap events we have developed today that we're aware of. Rather disturbing news that Vladimir Putin, and he made it public at that, not just that he did it, but that he made it public, which is a clear political signal, make no mistake, to NATO. Vladimir Putin has placed his nuclear forces on high alert. So, will Sleepy Joe reach for the button? Let's hope not, because we'll all be glowing. Over 10,000 warheads on intercontinental ballistic missiles and sea-launched ballistic missiles at the disposal of the Russian Federation president. And the Pershing IIs, not in Europe anymore. They're gone. We got rid of those a long time ago. The Minuteman, most of those are gone. Yeah, not that I'd ever want to see them used. So Putin puts his forces, his nuclear forces on high alert. The German government has done an about-face on the SWIFT system, which, for those of you who think it's a payment system, it's not. A lot of people just discovering what SWIFT is, just like a lot of people are just discovering where Ukraine is at. The SWIFT system is actually a communications network that facilitates the transactions amongst the major banks around the world. 11,000 major banks like Credit Suisse, Chase Manhattan, JP Morgan, HSBC, these are all involved in SWIFT, and it allows transactions to occur. Right now, we've been buying 595,000 barrels of oil a day from Russia. Why? Oil is at $93 a barrel this morning in the spot market. That's $55 million a day in the coffer of Vladimir Putin. Meanwhile, the USAID and the State Department have offered $54 million of emergency humanitarian assistance to Ukraine. Wow, that's so generous. Thank you so much for that. You guys are just so on the ball there at Foggy Bottom. I'll tell you what, man. I'll tell you what. So, what else? What else? Let's divert from this for just a second here, folks. And let me talk very quickly about the name we dare not speak for being censored on social media. Voldemort, the former president of the United States, spoke here last night at CPAC in what I would have to describe as not a typical Voldemort speech. In other words, it wasn't high energy, he wasn't railing. It was very much a political speech, very polished, measured and controlled. It had some lines, but not really many zingers in it. Not the sort of standard thing which would lead people probably on the left to start saying, oh, is he past it? Is he tired? Is he unwell? But I will say this. It was a spot-on, hit every key point speech, only an hour and 27 minutes too, by the way. It's somewhat short for Voldemort. He usually likes to go for 2 hours or more. But my legs were killing me, my feet were killing me last night, so after being here all day and doing multiple interviews, I was fine with the speech being an hour and 27 minutes. It was good, but it wasn't the typical one that Voldemort would have, excuse me. But it was a good speech. So, where we're at now, folks, is we have people finally taking actions that should have taken place 10 months ago. When Vladimir Putin put 70,000 troops on the border with Ukraine, beyond the troops who are already there, Biden should have taken action. Instead of declaring a jihad on the American energy industry, Biden should have opened up the American energy industry. But he is kowtowing to a bunch of lunatics who, get this, in order to reduce climate change and reduce the parts per million of carbon dioxide in the air, they don't want people to use hydrocarbons for energy. Okay, fair enough. Hydrocarbons, when they release, they burn, they release carbon dioxide. I got you. I appreciate that. Yeah, you don't want to go up 300 parts per million, whatever. Whatever. Fine. Okay. I don't say I agree with that because, I sort of learned about photosynthesis as a child, and whatever the case is. Let's accept that. So how are we going to do that? We'll stop the U.S. energy industry from fracking, from tight oil, from shale oil, and that'll stop the carbon dioxide. Okay, so we've cost the U.S. energy industry over 250,000 jobs, high-paying jobs, by the way, for most people. We have crippled segments of our economy in North Dakota, in Pennsylvania, and elsewhere. And we're no longer the world's largest energy producer and the world's largest petroleum producer, outproducing Saudi Arabia. Can you imagine that? Could you ever imagine that in 1987, or when I was in the Gulf War in 1991, that we would outproduce Saudi Arabia, which then went up to 13 million barrels per day? They're not now. They're down to about 10 million barrels per day. But we were outproducing Saudi Arabia. We've gone from that to a situation where we're at now. It's unfathomable. It's completely stupid. So they killed our energy industry, or tried to kill it, stopping leases in the Gulf of Mexico, stopping leases on federal land, which belongs to the people, not to the federal government. It belongs to the people. These lunatics said the same thing about the caribou. Oh, the caribou are going to die if the Alaska pipeline is made. We've had Alaska pipeline for 50 years nearly. And guess what? There's 3 times as many caribou in the region as there were in 1970. Wow, look at that. Somebody didn't know what they're talking about, did they? So they kill our energy production, and what do? It doesn't lead to an overnight revolution where people using solar photovoltaic, solar thermal, wind, algae for biofuels. Didn't happen because it's inefficient, every one of those methods of energy production. You still can't beat the internal combustion engine for energy efficiency. You can't. And very readily available. So what do? We harmed our industry on the ludicrous assumption, and idiots all over the country believe this nonsense from these leftists, that it will reduce our carbon production and consumption. No, it's gone up exponentially. Well, not exponentially, but arithmetically, I should say. Why? Because now we import oil from Iran, from the mullahs in a theocracy, where we haven't imported oil since like 1979, and 600,000 barrels a day from Russia. So the oil is dug up in Russia and Tehran, shipped in super tankers across critically ecologically sensitive zones like the Baltic, the Black Sea, the Dardanelles and Bosphorus, the Mediterranean, Gibraltar, across the Atlantic, to refineries on the East Coast and the Gulf Coast. How much energy is produced there, or wasted there? How much carbon is produced by transporting the energy all the way over there, all the way over here, instead of using it here at homegrown? It's like the stupidity of stopping the Keystone XL pipeline. Oh, we're going to reduce carbon by getting rid of that. Really? As long as oil is over $70, $80 a barrel, it's profitable to dig up the tar sands. And by the way, the tar sands aren't some great pristine wilderness. It's pollution. It's nature's pollution. That oil bubbling up and polluting the soil in Alberta. It's not exactly a pristine environment. Yes, the byproducts and the waste that come off that are quite dangerous, and they are an environmental issue, absolutely. But they're not even making that argument because they're not that bright, or they take you for idiots. So instead of taking tar sands oil and letting it flow through a pipeline which is almost entirely gravity-fed from Alberta through the Plain States down to the Gulf Coast in refineries which, ironically, are ideally suited for processing this low-grade petroleum into products in Louisiana and East Texas. Now, they're going to load them up in truckers, in tankers, drive them through the ecologically sensitive Rocky Mountains to Vancouver, loading them up in super tankers and taking them through the narrow straits, the Puget Sound, across the Pacific to Chinese refineries where they don't care about environmental standards, and they convert this stuff into products. Now, how does that reduce carbon? It doesn't. It's a huge waste of carbon. These people are morons. They don't care about the environment. It's about power and virtue signaling to convince and dupe people around the world. It's absolutely ludicrous. And so now we're buying oil from Russia, giving them $55 million per day. Why? Why? I mean, unless your end game is if you actually believe that oil stops getting produced by the planet hasn't got intense geopolitical pressure creating new petroleum. It all came from one period, 55 million years ago, whatever. Let's not get into that. But unless you believe that allowing Russia to deplete all its resources means one day we'll have all the oil left, there's no reason to this argument. That's just stupid. Anyway, these people are total, utter morons. Trevor Bush says, let me get some of the chat, says that the mainstream, fake stream media coverage of Ukraine has been pathetic. Seems that people with cell phones are giving better coverage. Yeah, well, I'm on a cell phone right now. Giving better analysis, too. You get these talking heads that don't know what I'm talking about. Look, not to defame anybody, but because a guy served 2 years in combat, was wounded, doesn't make him a geopolitical expert. And by the same token, you say that me having served 36 years in the Army, 30 as an intelligence officer, and having served in combat in Africa, Middle East, and the Balkans, doesn't make me qualified either. And it wouldn't. Those things wouldn't make me. But the fact that I actually did those things and wrote U.S. foreign policy and executed might lend credence to what I'm saying. You judge for yourself, folks. You judge for yourself. You make your own decisions. You follow and listen to who you want to watch. That's your call. So, yeah, no, but I find it comical. It's like here at CPAC, I saw a lot of journalists who rush up to these political candidates that they're kind of hot because they're this or that, they're the flavor of the moment, and they're running for office. And people that have no geopolitical experience, they're not political scientists, they're not analysts, they're not intelligence officers, they're not veterans. Some are veterans, but with a couple of years in the Air Force, it doesn't make you a subject matter expert. Now, everyone's welcome to an opinion, but they're not asking for an opinion, they're asking for a political candidate to say something about a very important geopolitical issue. So I find it entertaining. Anyway, that's just where I'm at. But the Germans have done about face. The Russians have put their nuclear forces on high alert. Joe Biden, I don't know, is he up yet? It must be like 11 o'clock in the morning by now. I'm sure he's up by now, out of his PJs, ready to give a speech. Still, I'm still chuckling that after I did 3 broadcasts, including one in South Africa, 2 of my own broadcasts, went to the airport, flew to Orlando, got to my hotel, all kinds of issues, check in because their computers were down, their key card was down, yada yada. Only 20 minutes for the security guard to let me in my room. Get to my room, 1:30 in the morning, start to unpack my suitcase, turn the tube on, and Putin has invaded Ukraine. I'm waiting for the leader of the free world to go on camera and tell people what's going on and whether it's going to be okay or it's going to be wrong. And there's no leader of the free world, no announcement. And then a few minutes later they said, Biden's going to speak in 11 hours. 11 hours? Does it take that long to get chocolate chip ice cream in the White House? Is Baskin Robbins closed? I guess at 1:30 in the morning it would be closed. So I did a 3-hour live stream explaining to people what's going on based on breaking news. It's leader of the free world, sleeping. Now, obviously I'm embellishing. I seriously doubt Biden was sleeping. He's probably up at that hour, but he's not talking to the world. You get my point. He's asleep at the wheel if he's not actually physically sleeping. It's really sad, folks. Really, really, truly sad where we're at in this world and what's going on. And it's even sadder how easily people are hoodwinked. For instance, the Tamara Leach thing. Now, she may in fact be dead, but there's no confirmation of it. It's just rumors and spreading like wildfire that she's dead, found dead in her cell. For those who don't recall, Tamara Leach is the lead organizer of the Freedom Rally 2022 to get people to raise funds for the truckers, which of course the criminal regime of Juicy Trudeau undermined by going to a fundraising platform, GoFundMe, or as I prefer to call them, Go Fraud Me, and convince them not to give the money over perfectly legitimate legal means to the people who raised it, and then try to give it to charities of their own choice. So people went to Give, Send, Go, and then they tried to classify those actions as domestic terrorism. It's unbelievable, the repression, whether it's in the universities, tech titans, our corporate boards. ExxonMobil has 2 leftists, dyed-in-the-wool leftists. ExxonMobil had a number of shares purchased by a leftist investment arm, which is not really an investment arm, they're political activism, but they're rich and they use it to buy resources so they can buy shares in companies so they can have influence. And they got 2 members put on the board. And shareholders voted for them. Stupid. You all need to pay attention if you own shares in a company about what idiots are going to be on that board. So where will ExxonMobil go? World's largest petroleum producer? Probably the same direction as Beyond Petroleum. Beyond Petroleum, who's that? That's British Petroleum. You know, they go by Beyond Petroleum. That's their nickname now for the past number of years, is they go into green energy. Green energy. contributes virtually nothing to British Petroleum's bottom line. Why do I know? I'm a shareholder. When did I buy BP? After the Deepwater Horizon blowout. That's when I bought it. Why? Because I did my analysis. And I estimated that even if a record-setting fine of $23 billion was imposed upon British Petroleum, and the cleanup costs, which I estimate between $4 and $6 billion on the back of an envelope, even if you put those two together, and then civil charges came from families and added another $10 billion, not ExxonMobil, but British Petroleum still had over $38 billion in cash reserves at that time. Not to mention the rights to Gulf oil leases, to Nigeria oil leases, and the Niger Delta, and so on, that was worth a couple $100 billion. So I made a calculation that this was a short-term blip, and it was, and it paid off. Just an average Joe, folks. Just an average Joe. Not Larry Kudlow here, just an average Joe, doing my analysis, making my decisions. So, anyway, that's not a shill for BP. I wouldn't buy it right now if I were you. Anyway, so that's kind of where I'm at. Let me see some of the chat here, what people had to say. Voldemort's speech was so awesome, rousing, inspiring, with pointed and directed attacks to left. It was Idaho Garden Girl. It was very pointed. It was very accurate. It wasn't your typical zinger speech. So it was interesting. But it was a very good speech. Leftists like Justin Castro and Sleepy Joe literally want communism to communist China. Yeah. Well, we're not even talking about Taiwan, are we? Hey, Erica, thanks for putting links into my link tree. I appreciate that. Say tar sands one more time and I'll root my... Tar's not a bad word. It's not a bad word. It's got a bad reputation because people tar and feather politicians. But tar is what you put on your roof. It's what you put on your highways. It's just bitumen. You want me to call it the bitumen sands instead, Tony? The male Jody Taylor's here. Welcome to you. Rob McLaren is in. Hey, Rob. Erica, what else we got here? Vexloigmon says the problem is the United States is not much unified anymore. The nation united can kick anybody's anatomy and leaders. Well, there's some truth to that statement. I won't disagree with you on that one. It's oil sands. Oil. No, it's bitumen. It's bitumen. For those who watch that little clip I play all the time, that little kid. Look, it's a fucking goat. No, it's just a goat. Oh, it's a fucking goat. It's not tar sands, it's oil sands. Look at these small mercies. At least the Secret Service didn't give Biden a medical mercy for me. Exactly. Grumpy old man says, hey, refer to him as Justin Castro. I call him Juicy. Feel like a Juicy Smollett. Many of the videos I've seen coming out of Ukraine from civilians show very disorganized Russian forces, logistics failures. Do you think this shows weakness or Putin's playing for 40 chess? No, I think that they're legitimate. So it's kind of funny. Did you see the video in which Ukrainians reportedly come across a Russian tank that ran out of fuel? And would you guys like a ride back? Would you like us to give you a ride back to Russia? That's classic. I mean, some of these are really sad, but there's some great lines that come out of Ukraine, like the guys on Snake Island, when this is Russian ship. We suggest you lay down your arms, or we'll fire upon you. Go F yourselves was the response, and they murdered all 13 of those border guards. Yeah, and then this as well. So, listen, in the Gulf War, I mean, combat operations are remarkably complicated. Soldiers can burn through all their ammunition in a couple of minutes if they're on fire discipline. You can run through your fuel idling, sitting and waiting to move forward if there's a convoy jam, if you can't use the roads effectively, or if there's resistance in a place. So before we start saying that the Russians are disorganized or ineffective, you have to understand the fog of war. You have to understand what happens in battle. I can tell you that even though our offensive was on track, on time, being executed to the letter, remarkably, for 670,000 forces on the battlefield, in the first Gulf War that I was a participant in, we were 15 minutes from being out of fuel. I was an active duty 3rd Battalion, 8th Cavalry, 3rd Armored Division, 2nd Brigade. We were getting mortar fire, and we had to stop because we had no fuel. Pennsylvania National Guardsmen came with these big fuel tankers and arrived just in time. They drove up to each of our vehicles. We sat in convoy, in line, in the desert, like ships at sea, and topped off our vehicles while we were there. And they saved our bacon. That was our unit. And they were rushing from place to place, and they were doing it 24/7. The Russians have an incredibly complicated offensive plan. They've invaded from Belarus in the north, they've invaded from Russia in the west on multiple axes, and they invaded from Crimea. And in addition to that, they use their naval forces to attack Snake Island and to shell Odessa in the southwest. So this is a very complicated operation. There are going to be snafus, there are going to be mistakes. It's not going to go as smoothly as people make it think. Everyone talks about Germany and Blitzkrieg. The Germans didn't conquer Poland in a day. It took them 17 days to conquer Poland. They only conquered half, not even half of it. And that was with a few million men. The Russians aren't using a few million men. And they're attacking territory on a front as large as what the Germans did against Poland. And the Germans did it from a couple different angles. They attacked from Pomerania, Silesia, which went kind of like in a C shape. And they attacked. They also came from East Prussia, which was over here, and attacked down here. So these attacks came this way, and those came that way. And then after 17 days, the Russians invaded. It actually took a month to subdue Poland. So the fact that the Ukraine invasion is in day 4, and there are some logistical errors, there are some Russian units not performing the way that the armchair analysts at Fox and MSNBC say they should be performing, and declaring that the Ukrainians have been a great defensive force, which they may be, but we have no independent confirmation of that. So you can't accept it at face value. What you're going to say is that, what I can say clearly is that the fog of war is in play here. You don't have the reports. Now, the people at the Central Intelligence Agency, Defense Intelligence Agency, and other organizations ought to have a better picture of this with access to classified information. But they ought to. That's not saying they do. CyberS says, thank you for your coverage of what's happening in Ukraine. I've learned a lot that I doubt very much I would have learned from the likes of Chicken News Network. Yeah, no, Chicken News Network. I heard that before. It's pretty good. Yeah, you wouldn't have heard it there. They bring on the likes of Alexander Vindman, the retired Army Lieutenant Colonel who's ass burned because his view was smarter and better informed than the President of the United States. You know what? I've made recommendations to the President of the United States and they weren't followed. It didn't hurt my ego, my feelings, because it's not about me. But for Alexander Vindman, it's all about him. And now he's a paid analyst on CNN. You see him sitting there, he's all clenched up and sweating and all nervous on air and like he's going to pop a pimple out of his head. Now, you may be going, that's not fair, Chris, you're picking on Alexander Vindman. Well, I am picking on him. He was disrespectful to chain of command, and he violated norms of being an officer. Not acceptable. Because someone doesn't take your advice doesn't mean you get the right to lie in front of the Senate. Lots of leaders did take my advice, and lots of them did take my advice. That's their call. That's what they get paid for. And when I'm a leader, I listen to my team, and it's up to me to make that decision. If I don't agree with the decision, as long as it's not illegal, there's nothing I can do except buck it up, buttercup, and move on. And that's what should happen here. But that is not what's happened with that clown. So now he's a paid analyst at CNN making lots of money, and I'm sitting here on YouTube. Am I jealous? Nope, not at all. Not one of the analysts for CNN. Best thing for Ukraine is acquiesce to those areas that they want to be Russian. Well, as I said before this conflict ever started, one goal I suspect that's something that Putin would want is that the eastern third of the Ukraine up to the Dnieper River, they just annex it. And they control the entire Dnieper all the way down to Crimea, and they firm up their western border by taking out a little bubble that's in it now because Ukraine went so far east. That might be an objective. I don't know if it is his objective, but I think it might be an objective of Vladimir Putin. We'll see, folks. Anyway, so you think that many Russian soldiers refuse to fight further, seeing as how many Russian citizens against the war? I don't think Russian citizens for against the war has any impact on Russian soldiers. Folks, having served in combat, I wasn't influenced by events taking place back home, even though I listened to shortwave radio, to the BBC, to Voice of America, to American Forces Network. In the midst of combat even, I had those radios on the back of my track. I didn't influence my reaction on the battlefield at all. Well, that's another thing I didn't talk about. So I mentioned the huge demonstration in Berlin, like all the Germans like, support for Ukraine. You know, like that's going to make a difference. We saw this is all unfolded before. I can give you the perfect case of this of Russian or Soviet aggression against an innocent neighbor in which their very existence was threatened. But that neighbor survived, despite the fact that Churchill, Roosevelt, did nothing to help that neighbor. And that neighbor was Finland. 1939, November 1939, the Soviets invaded Finland. And they threw everything they had at Finland, over 600,000 just one front. And the Finns destroyed the Soviets. But they couldn't hold out forever. International volunteers, including Americans, Swedes, Germans, Brits, Norwegians, volunteered to go there. But by the time most of them got there, the war was over. Only a handful of them actually made any difference. And the U.S. and Britain did nothing to help Finland, an innocent nation. Now, through miracle of the Finnish spirit and the Soviet giving up, they didn't want to, this is too tough a nut to crack. They got what they wanted, political concessions. They let them stay independent. Will that happen with Ukraine? I don't think that's likely. I think it's very likely that Russia will annex the eastern third of Ukraine up the Dnieper River. Just saying, folks. That's just saying. See the Russian troops dancing with the Ukrainian troops. I have not seen that, Erica. I have not seen that. Our side of the Monroe Doctrine is peaceful, case closed. I'm not sure what's meant by that. American intel, you mean sleep-deprived schmucks? Oh, I don't know what you're talking about there. Is that in Buselo? I spent 30 years in the intelligence community. I'm not a sleep-deprived schmuck. I've made intelligence analysis that saved the lives of countless individuals, and we're talking the hundreds of thousands, and it dramatically improved lives, reduced combat casualties, reduced destruction of civilian targets, and also kept political leaders better informed and military leaders better informed. And I worked at all levels, tactical, operations, strategic. If your comment by that is to imply that the intelligence community is not flawless and people make mistakes, then I'll accept that. That does happen quite a bit. And there are some schmucks in the intelligence community, there's no doubt about it, just like any other place. But the community is a schmuck. What's the size of the U.S. fleet around Taiwan? Well, Corona's boring, do they anything? That'd be the 7th Fleet, which is headquartered in Hawaii. And I think it's the 7th Fleet, 6th Fleet. I think it's the 7th Fleet, yeah, 6 fleets in the Persian Gulf. 7th Fleet, it's not very big. The U.S., we have less than 400 capital ships now. We had a 500 ship Navy under Ronald Reagan. We don't have that anymore. The Chinese Navy now has more capital ships than we do. Yeah. It's not as effective, or it can't deploy and project itself like we can, but it has more. What can I understand is why hasn't Ukraine lobbing missiles back at the Russians? They don't have them. They don't have any Scud missiles. They don't have any surface ballistic missiles like the Russians do. That's why. They barely have adequate air defense means, and with the limited air defense means and radars they have, they've been shooting down aircraft. It's actually been a very impressive performance from that. The Russians have air superiority, but only because the Ukrainians don't have anything to fly. Yeah, it's the same thing here. What good that we're sending needs to get there before they all die? Well, it's too late for that. It's too late for that. The good should have been done before. Donald Trump sold Javelin missiles through security assistance cooperation contracts with the Ukrainians to the Ukrainians. That's what he did. Barack Obama sent blankets and band-aids when the Crimea was invaded and annexed. That's what he did. Joe Biden didn't send any weapons until it was too late. Isn't it also ironic that the leftists in D.C. are now calling to arm Ukraine when it's too late? And they're cheering the fact that regular civilians with no training, no understanding of firearms, no ammunition, are being given rifles in the streets of Kiev, yet they want to deny Second Amendment rights to law-abiding American citizens. These people are just demonic. The reason some Russian vehicles halted is because no fuel and lack of support. I was surprised how Ukraine was fighting, underestimating the underdogs. That may be true, but I don't really think that's the case. I think that, I know that an operation like this is incredibly complicated from a logistical standpoint, and that alone, if you have any, folks, if you have one snafu, if you're at the point where it happens, it might be 5 minutes for you, but think about the hundreds, the thousands of troops and vehicles behind you that get backed up. Sometimes when it gets backed up, you add a few more seconds or minutes to that. And it's just like when you're walking with people, and it's snakes. People go faster, they go slower. Next thing you know, the people in the front are a quarter mile or a kilometer ahead of you. You're way back here. That's what happens in combat, and that's before you even take consideration roads that are not complete, bridges that can't support armored vehicles, and or a resistance. It doesn't take much resistance to slow down a military movement that is bogged down by lack of logistic support or poor road conditions. It was Daryl Issa there for a second there. I saw somebody over there. What's the apologies for, Andrew? I think Anonymous is going to make things quite interesting. How about you? I don't know who Anonymous is. Who's Anonymous? If there is a war and you are called back to active service, will you go? Will you have a chance? No, I don't have any say. I mean, if I get activated, I have no choice but to return to active service, which would mean I have to shave the beard off. The hair is short enough, it's correct, but the beard has to come off. No, I have no choice. Once you're retired, you're retired. I'm on a retired list, so the Army can call me back at any time. Anytime. Now, it's highly unlikely I would be called back, but yeah, no, that's just reality. That's why you get paid a check, which what makes it even more egregious that retirees don't get dental care, because active duty get dental care. And why do you get dental care? It's not because we want people to have pretty teeth. It's because one of the most debilitating things that can happen to you is have a toothache or cavity. It's debilitating. People can't serve. So we've always had dental care for active duty. When you're retired and you're subject to recall, you don't get dental care. I got to pay out of pocket, and it's expensive. So not only do I get 45% less than the money I used to get when I was active duty, but I also have to pay for things I didn't pay for, like health care and dental care. But I'm still responsible for my health care and my dental care to make sure I'm fit for military service. So it's just ironic. But it's all about screwing soldiers and Congress raising their benefits, their salaries and everything, but not us. Thanks for the update. You're welcome. Ukraine could become Russia's new Afghanistan. Possibly, but I wouldn't get carried away. I suspect we're going to see events unfold over 2 weeks, and then we'll have to make another assessment. That might be the end of it. But right now, it's really hard to say. Yes, I've already mentioned that Putin has ordered his nuclear force to high alert. That was one of the first things I mentioned on the stream. Hey, Backwoods Law. 7th Fleet is Japan. Well, yeah, Japan. Well, okay. The fleet is in Japan. That's where it's headquartered at. But it's part of the Indo-Pacific Command, which is headquartered in Hawaii. So I misspoke. That's what I'm going to say. Yeah, 6th Fleet is in the Med. Yeah, it's in Naples. Yeah, that's why I said 7th Fleet. I think I said 6 went to Persian Gulf because they've sent ships there before. Yeah, but 7th Fleet. It's the 5th Fleet that's been out in the Persian Gulf before. Leftist infiltrators bring their schmuck to it, everything. Exactly. Most of them won't go in the military. Well, some go in the military just like some cops go in the New York Police Department just so they can claim they're cops and they get elected mayor, and then they're still leftist scumbags. Eric Adams. How fearful is the activation of nuclear forces likeness and nukes being used? The likeliness of nuclear weapons being used, I think, is low, thankfully, at the moment. But it is quite a disconcerting statement to hear the Russians put their forces on high alert. That's a very serious and concerning issue, folks. That's a very serious. By the way, hey, help a brother out. Give me a like on the stream if you don't mind. I am streaming live from the convention center here. It's not a convention, it's a hotel here. It's the Shingle Creek Hotel here in Orlando on the final day of CPAC. I did carry Larry Kudlow earlier, and I recorded it rather than live stream it. And that was a good thing because Larry Kudlow said something that would probably get me a strike on YouTube. So I'm going to have to edit that out before I load that video up. I was going to load it immediately. I did a couple interviews of candidates, one for State House and one other for Congress earlier, Phil Rizzo, and then Matthew Rauschenk, I think was his name was, from Illinois. Maybe interview some other folks today. We'll see. And then this thing ends early this afternoon. I'll head back to my hotel and sort out what I'm going to do for this evening. Anyway, so that's kind of where we're at right now, but I'll keep giving these Ukraine updates as we go along. I'm here in Orlando again tomorrow, so I'll have all the time in the world to do live streams and get you updated on the breaking news about Ukraine and my analysis of Ukraine. And then Tuesday morning, I fly back to Pennsylvania, and I'll get back late morning. I'll be tired because I have to get up at 4 o'clock and go to the airport. And then as long as my flight isn't delayed, I will be on my program. And then after my program, I'll have Daniel Elof on my program. After my program, I will then be, I'll then be on Ronaldo for Wednesdays with the Colonel. So it's going to be a long day for me Wednesday as well. So lots going on here, folks. And go check out my other videos. I've done over 30 videos, interviews, live streams, and then also speeches by people here at CPAC this week. I've met one or two Ukrainians. I wouldn't say no experience with firearms. Well, okay, Corona's boring. That's fine, one or two, but they don't carry firearms by and large. So, what's demonic is the UN sanctioned Russian banks with the clear intent of them revolting. We don't want to fight a war. I don't understand where you're going there. The UN sanctioning Russian banks. I've seen no sanctions from the UN. What sanctions the UN imposed? A hacker group's trying to hack into Russian TV system. Oh yeah. RT was shut down by hackers. That's unlawful. I don't agree with that sort of activity. Australia's governments have been taking advice from civilian defense department staff with dodgy degrees from Marxist. I agree with you. Hey, who's this from India? Welcome from India. We don't do much coverage of India, but we talk a lot about Indians, particularly in the context of South Africa. And I met a few Indians here this week at CPAC. Thanks for tuning in from India. Wow, it's nice to grow an audience. I will be talking about India sometime soon because Nas Bhutta will be guest on my program coming up in the next couple of weeks. And Nas is developing the rugby program in India. So we will be talking about India coming up. So thanks for joining us. Be sure to smash the like button and become a subscriber. If you're new and you haven't been a subscriber in the past, you'll find independent analysis from someone that's been there and done that. Not just some talking head who went to a radio television degree at a Midwestern university and because they're dead sexy or they're skinny as a rail gets on television. You're going to get it from somebody that's been there and done that and practiced it. And you don't have to take my word for it. Look me up. My bona fides are real. And you don't have to agree with my analysis. Dislike the video. You can leave a comment. You can watch something else. Or you can go find the information for yourself. But I wrap it up here in a concise fashion in words that anybody can understand without insulting my audience. Could non-military men be called for duty wartime? Where? In the U.S. calling? No. No. We don't have anything like that. You'd have to enact some sort of legislation. If you ever have to shave the beard, you need to donate. Yeah, people keep saying that. What's the chances of nuclear weapons being deployed? Well, deployed is a very loose term. There's a good chance nuclear weapons will be deployed. That means you simply move, rocket launchers from one place to another, missile launchers from one place to another. Used, I think is the word you want to say. Fired. That's the problem. I don't think that's likely. Should we buy iodine tablets for possible radiation? Francois Vandemeva, I would argue that iodine tablets are just a smart thing to have all the time, and also water purification tablets as a person that if you like to prep. Punch the like. Thank you very much for that, John. Nuclear deterrent forces are always on high alert. To put them off with special alert, that's higher than... Yeah, okay, well, you're playing word games in terminology. And again, I'm explaining to an audience of people who are novices from around the world. Some have background, some don't. So I'm sticking with my terminology here. Let me guess. Potable water is unknown, just like the Roosevelt colored. Much love from Very Hot Crew. Hey, Wendy, good to see you again there. Levan Jansa, good there. You still doing streams with BDL Liberty? Yeah, well, that's at noon. It's 1 o'clock. Yeah, I'm doing that. Thanks for reminding me. I got Big Daddy Liberty 1 o'clock. I got to remember that. Shoot. That's right. What time is it now, man? 1 o'clock. I got to do that with Big Daddy Liberty. I forgot about that. Also, I've got to go. Oh, I think I'm missing someone I wanted to catch. By the way, guess who's speaking right now, folks? If you're in South Africa, you're going to get a kick out of this. Lana Marks is speaking today. Former U.S. ambassador. Yeah, that's right. I'm going to have to come right back here with Big Daddy Liberty. Jeez, I forgot about that. Erica did a super chat, super sticker saying, good job. Thank you for the 35 Rand. Erica, I appreciate that. Paul Kruger, how are you? I'm quite well, K97. So much BS reporting online. Thanks for the stream. Hurry up and get home so you can do a proper update. I will. Also, I have videos I have to edit and more videos to load, which were too dangerous for Putin because people said things about the choosing of 2020 where they talked about the spicy cough in a fashion that would have got my channel canceled. In fact, when Nigel Farage, who I met here in the hallway a short while ago, and when Nigel Farage did his speech, he said things about the choosing of 2020 that if I had been, I was airing it and I had to stop the stream right there so I didn't lose my channel. I went back to my hotel, I downloaded that video as soon as I could, and then I deleted it off my stream. I will restore Nigel Farage's his speech along with the portion where I'll delete that audio where he said would get my channel deleted and censored, and then I'll add in the portion I recorded after that, and we'll get that loaded up, because Nigel Farage was a rock star when he spoke. Unfortunately, he said things that on the censorship platform of YouTube would cost me my channel, so I couldn't do it. Anyway, so, yeah. What else we got here? I've also got to check. I'm supposed to meet with a few other people here. You really are not up to date on sanctions. Is that a question or a statement there, DJ? I mean, you put a sentence in there and you make a statement about something and you're not specific, and you said UN and you didn't give specific sanctions. There's all kinds of sanctions against all kinds of people passed by the Security Council that go on all the time. So, I mean, you're giving me a chat thing here. So when you say I'm really not up to date on sanctions, also, folks, just a second here. Give me a second here. So you do realize I'm working 18 hours a day and I'm here covering a conference, yet have taken the time to follow the news in the middle of the night, to be up at late when it's 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the morning, do live streams as events unfold in the Ukraine and give you analysis of things going on. I've talked about energy. I've talked about the price of oil. I've not heard a single analyst mention the price of oil and multiply that by the number of barrels per day and give the financial impact of that on any network. I've done that and give you analysis of what's going on from a combat perspective. And you're asking me if I'm really not up to date with UN sanctions, which you haven't been clear about. So I guess my answer would be no, because I'm not sure what sanctions you're talking about. Look, there's a lot going on here, and I think I'm holding water pretty well here, but then I'm accustomed to it. Putin openly threatens the West with nuclear weapons. He did by putting him on high alert. Watch crosstalk. It works on contact, hedge, then bets, and Kaiser report. Fight QE. Queen Elizabeth? I'm not sure what that means. Those are programs, I guess. Hello, Helen. Would they use EMPs, electromagnetic pulse, instead of conventional nukes? That's an interesting question. I don't have an answer for that. Got me there. It's the EU yeah, exactly. Thank you, Bob. It was the EU announced sanctions. I haven't seen any UN sanctions. They've talked about it. I actually brought it live as it was unfolding when Joe Biden was asleep in his bedroom, in his PJs. The UN Security Council was in session. The American ambassador there, Linda Thomas Greenfield, she was there, former ambassador library, whom I know from the State Department. She was there at the UN along with the Ghanaian ambassador and all the others. And I had that on in the background. We played a little bit of the audio from C-SPAN when that was unfolding that night. So the UN talked about sanctions, but I haven't seen anything come out of the UN Security Council. The European Union has announced sanctions, as have the Germans, independently. And so I'm not sure what UN sanctions. People throw terms around all the time. I can see 2 points. I'd love to see a smile. Okay, let's go. Yeah. People throw terms around all the time. Like, I kept hearing, I debunked this last week when people like, the UN has sent police to Ottawa to crush the truckers. No, it wasn't. But you're wrong. Check your facts. Okay? What facts? There are UN planes in North Bay in Ottawa, in Ontario. True. There is a Canadian air firm that leases aircraft to the United Nations, and they're periodically up there repeatedly for servicing. And that's what's going on. In 2017, people tried to run a story about the UN was invading Canada with those same, not those aircraft, but also the same thing from the same airline. So it was easy for me to debunk that very quickly, and people tell me the same thing. There are UN troops running around in armored vehicles and all that. That's nonsense. There's no such thing as UN troops. They don't own troops. It doesn't work that way, folks. It doesn't work that way. Anyway, so you have to be specific because people run off about things. They hear things. Like right now, the whole internet is on fire. Tamara Lynch is dead. She was found dead in her cell. That's what the internet's saying. There's no confirmation of that whatsoever. I hope not. It's a tragedy beyond all proportion if Tamara Lynch is dead. The organizer of the Freedom Convoy 2022 in Canada, trying to raise money through the GoFraudMe site, GoFundMe. I hope she's not dead. There's no confirmation, but the internet is rife with it. Doesn't mean it's not true, but to assert that it's true without any confirmation is foolhardy. So let's hope it's not true, though. My great-grandfather's proudest boast was he never shaved. Wow, I can't say that. I was in the Army 37 years. Nigel, good to see you again. Nice to see you getting around. Well, I'm definitely getting around. Brexit are smegheads. Smegheads. I'll give you credit for that. Smegheads. That's Red Dwarf there. And Mr. B gave 140 Rand super chat. Thank you for that. I love when you talk issues related to war. Well, thank you for that, Michael. It's my pleasure. Price of a barrel of oil in Kuwait is half a U.S. soldier in Kuwait. Okay. Thank you, Chris. We need more. Appreciate your outstanding work. Thank you so much for the calling. And I got to stop here shortly. Thank you, Grant. Good to see you there. My weekend is exhausting. I'm very tired. I really need a break. I've been running my butt off trying to get these things done. You keep it up. Thanks a lot there. Appreciate that. Stone. It's a Harmstone. What about the EU excluding Russian banks from SWIFT? How much of an impact will it have? Will have an immediate impact because SWIFT isn't controlled by the EU. It's an international thing. It's based in Brussels, but it's controlled internationally. The U.S., the Europeans are involved, and other people involved in it. It will have a big impact because you won't be able to trade oil. You can't make the transactions because that's communications means. It's not the actual transaction. It's a communications network that allows these things to happen. And without SWIFT, they won't be able to trade those funds. And so what are you going to do? Barter? Here's 2 tons of wheat for 1,000 barrels of oil. It's not going to work very well. Monray says, thank you for the dedication. My pleasure. No problem. Okay, Chris, thank you for your hard work. You're welcome, Wolf. And then, Ronell Gons came in. Thank you for going out of your way to keep us informed, Chris. It's really appreciated. Great job. Well, Ronell, thank you so much. And thank you for the super chat, and also thank you for thinking of me in a difficult time for you. I appreciate it. Thank you so much, everybody. Listen, folks, I don't mean to cut things short. You know, I can go for ages, but I do need to get back to the conference. Also, I'm trying to meet, because my viewers have asked me to link up with Daisy Cousins from Australia. I met 2 people that know her. She said she'd get in touch with me. I haven't heard from her yet. She said she's here. I haven't seen her yet. There aren't that many people here on the final day. I mean, once Trump spoke, a lot of people, they've had their fill, they're done. But this is the final day. Donald Trump Jr. speaks this afternoon. Lana Marks is speaking right now. And I've got to go on Big Daddy Live here shortly. So I've got to do a few quick things. I'm going to end it here. Thank you for the likes. There's 110 of you here, 106 likes. That means there's some freeloaders sitting around, because there's been a lot more than 100 people here watching the stream. Thank you all for the super chats. I really appreciate it. And I'll be back later with a wrap up of things and let you know what's going on. So Ariane Gandhi, thank you for that. Also, people in India coming in, thank you for tuning in. Become a subscriber. You'll find incredible content here that covers a wide variety of topics, from politics to economics to culture to language to sports to music. Take your pick. We cover it all here. Thanks a lot, folks. Got to go. I'll catch you in a bit. Be safe out there. Thank you for the links, Erica.